When a billionaire saw his son laughing with a waitress crawling on the floor, he made a decision that would change all their lives forever, but no one could have guessed what he was planning. The morning sunlight spilled gently through the large windows of the city cafe, painting the polished wooden floors with a soft golden glow. It was a place that often drew people from all walks of life, but particularly those who loved to sit, quietly sip expensive coffee, and watch the world move around them. For most visitors, it was a simple cafe, nothing more than a spot to grab breakfast or a latte. But for Alexander Hayes, a man whose wealth and influence made headlines in every major business magazine, it was a place of rare calm, a small retreat from the endless demands of his life. He was not a man who sought attention. He preferred observing life quietly, letting the chaos of the city play out before him without interference. On this particular morning, Alexander had decided to take his young son Ethan out for breakfast. The boy was only 6, but full of curiosity and wonder, with wide eyes that seemed to notice everything. From the smallest crack in the floor tiles to the way sunlight bounced off the silver spoons on the tables, Alexander had always cherished moments like this, brief escapes from the pressures of his empire. Today, he wanted nothing more than to watch Ethan laugh, ask 1,000 questions, and enjoy a simple meal. He knew these mornings were fleeting. Children grew quickly, and life had a way of rushing past as they entered the cafe. The familiar scent of fresh bread and brewing coffee greeted them. The soft chatter of patrons and the gentle clinking of cups created a comforting background. Alexander guided Ethan to a corner table, one that offered a clear view of the cafe without making them the center of attention. The boy scrambled onto the chair with a grin, excitement shining in his eyes as he watched the staff move swiftly, tending to customers with practiced efficiency. Among the staff was a young waitress named Lily. She was in her early 20s. With tired eyes that hinted at nights spent worrying about bills and family responsibilities, she had been working at the cafe for over a year, juggling shifts to support her mother, who had fallen ill and could no longer work. Life had been hard for Lily, and some days the weight of her responsibilities felt almost unbearable. Yet she came to work every morning, putting on a brave face, greeting customers with a polite smile, doing everything she could to keep her job. On this particular morning, however, things did not go as smoothly as usual. Lily was carrying a tray stacked with coffee cups, glasses of juice, and a plate of pastries. Her hands, though steady most of the time, trembled slightly as she navigated the crowded cafe. A sudden bump from a passing waiter caused the tray to tilt, and in an instant, several drinks toppled, spilling across the floor with a loud crash. Gasps rose from nearby tables, and a few patrons muttered complaints under their breath. Lily froze for a moment, her heart racing. She looked down at the mess she had made and felt a wave of panic. She knew she was already on thin ice at this job. Mistakes could mean a warning, a scolding, or worse, losing the position that kept her family afloat. Desperate, she dropped to her hands and knees, crawling across the floor to gather the fallen glasses and plates. Her movements were quick but careful, trying not to break anything further, all while hoping no one would notice the fear and embarrassment written across her face. It was then that Alexander Hayes noticed her. He had seen many things in his life boardroom: battles, corporate failures, public scandals, but something about this moment caught his attention in a way nothing else had. He saw a young woman, not wealthy or famous, facing an impossible situation with courage and determination. She did not complain, she did not ask for help, and she did not collapse under the pressure. Instead, she moved forward, crawling on the floor, doing everything she could to correct her mistake. There was a strange dignity in her desperation, a quiet strength that refused to be broken, even in the face of humiliation. Ethan, sitting beside his father, giggled softly at the sight. Unlike many of the other patrons who whispered judgments or shook their heads, the boy saw only someone trying her best. He reached out with his small hands, wanting to help, and Alexander smiled quietly, proud of his son's instinctive empathy. It was a rare thing. Alexander thought a child noticing humanity where adults saw only mistakes as the minutes passed. Lily continued her task, gathering broken glasses and mopping up spilled juice. Sweat glistened on her forehead, and her Uniform was damp from the effort, yet she did not stop, did not complain, did not shrink away from the gaze of the people around her. Alexander studied her movements closely. He noticed the precision in her actions, the way her fingers worked quickly but carefully, the faint tremor in her hands that betrayed her exhaustion. There was a story behind those eyes, a life filled with challenges that no amount of money could fix. For Alexander, this was more than a simple accident in a cafe. It was a moment of revelation. He thought about his own life, the privilege he had grown up with, the opportunities that had been handed to him without struggle. He thought about the boardrooms where he wielded influence and the wealth that came easily, and he realized how insulated he had been from the daily struggles of ordinary people. Watching Lily crawl on the floor, trying to survive and protect her dignity, he felt a connection to the raw human effort that often went unnoticed in the world he knew so well. Ethan, still fascinated, leaned forward and whispered to his father, "Why is she crawling on the floor, Daddy?" Alexander looked at his son, his mind racing with thoughts about life, privilege, and empathy. "She made a mistake, Ethan," he said softly. "But she's trying to fix it. That takes courage." The boy nodded, eyes wide, as if he were witnessing a lesson about humanity that no classroom could teach. Other patrons began to murmur, some shaking their heads, some offering reluctant help, and a few even laughing quietly at what they saw. But Alexander remained silent, observing. He felt a strange mix of emotions, admiration, pity, and curiosity. Who was this young woman? How did someone so small and seemingly powerless display such resilience? He realized he wanted to know more, to understand her story, not as a wealthy observer looking down from above, but as someone genuinely curious about human strength. The manager finally approached, offering assistance and quietly directing Lily to take a moment to breathe. She nodded, grateful yet embarrassed, her cheeks flushed. Alexander watched this exchange, noting how even small acts of authority could influence someone's dignity. He wondered how many people went through life like Lily, struggling quietly, facing impossible odds, and rarely receiving recognition, as Lily stood. Brushing herself off, Alexander noticed something else, the pride in her posture, subtle but undeniable. Despite the accident, despite the humiliation, she had maintained her resolve. She had faced a moment that could have crushed her spirit, yet she emerged with her self-respect intact. Alexander felt a rare admiration, not for a business deal or a strategic victory, but for a human being's ability to endure and persist. Ethan reached out again, offering a napkin to help clean the remaining mess. Lily smiled at the boy, a genuine, warm smile that seemed to lift some of the weight from her shoulders. Alexander felt a swell of pride watching his son respond with empathy, recognizing humanity where many adults saw only error. It was a small act, but it held enormous significance, a reminder that kindness and courage could exist in the smallest moments. Alexander knew, in that instant, that this encounter was more than coincidence. It was a glimpse into a life shaped by struggle, a life that mirrored the resilience and determination he valued deeply in his own way. Though in a vastly different context, he felt an unusual urge to act. Though he was unsure how, he did not want to patronize or pity, but he wanted to recognize, somehow, the strength he had witnessed. This was not about charity. It was about humanity. It's about acknowledging a person's effort and courage in a world that often ignored it. As the breakfast continued, Alexander and Ethan ate quietly, but Alexander's mind remained with Lily. He watched her return to the counter, continue her duties, and interact with other customers. Each movement, each gesture, seemed to confirm the story he had begun to imagine, a story of survival, determination, and quiet dignity. He felt a rare sense of connection, not based on wealth or power, but on the simple, undeniable fact of human resilience. By the time they finished their meal, Alexander knew that this moment would stay with him far longer than any business meeting, any financial deal, or any headline. He had witnessed a story unfolding in real time, a story that spoke of courage in the face of fear, dignity in the face of humiliation, and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. And he knew deep down that this was only the beginning. As they left the cafe, Alexander cast one last glance toward Lily, She was moving with quiet determination, carrying on as though nothing had happened, yet everything had changed within him. He did not yet know how, but he felt certain that this encounter, the spilled drinks, the crawling, the courage, would lead to something significant, something that would ripple far beyond the walls of the cafe, touching lives in ways he could not yet imagine. Ethan skipped alongside him, laughing and pointing at pigeons outside, unaware of the weight his father carried in his mind. Alexander smiled, realizing that today, in a small, crowded cafe, he had witnessed a lesson in humanity, humility, and resilience that no amount of money could ever buy. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of anticipation, of curiosity, and of responsibility that extended far beyond the world of wealth and power he knew so well. After that morning in the cafe, Alexander Hayes couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. The image of Lily crawling across the floor, picking up broken glasses and juice with trembling hands, kept replaying in his mind. It wasn't just the action itself that stayed with him, it was the way she carried herself, the determination and pride that refused to vanish even in a moment of embarrassment. Alexander had seen people under pressure before, many of them in boardrooms and business negotiations. But this was different. This was raw, unpolished humanity. It was something money couldn't buy, power couldn't manipulate, and connections couldn't fabricate. Ethan, his young son, had seemed unaffected at the time, enjoying his breakfast and laughing at small things in the cafe. But Alexander noticed how, even during their walk back to the car, the boy's thoughts seemed to linger on the event. "Daddy, why did she have to crawl?" Ethan asked again, a hint of confusion in his voice. Alexander considered the question carefully. How do you explain struggle to a 6-year-old? How do you describe the invisible burdens that people carry, the ones that make them humble and brave at the same time? She was trying to fix a mistake, Ethan, Alexander said softly, his voice steady but reflective. Sometimes, when people make mistakes, they have to work very hard to set things right. She didn't complain. She didn't give up. That's courage. Ethan thought about this quietly, his little brows furrowed. Even if people laughed at her? He asked. Alexander nodded. Even then, true courage is standing up poor crawling. Forward, Evan, when others are laughing. As they drove away from the cafe, Alexander's mind began to wander into unfamiliar territory. He often thought about business plans, market trends, and investments, but this morning he was thinking about people, about struggles and choices, about resilience. He wondered how many people in the city, people like Lily, were walking around quietly carrying burdens that nobody noticed. People working tirelessly just to survive, people who had the same hopes and dreams as his son but faced mountains of obstacles. Alexander reflected on the contrast between his life and hers. He had grown up with opportunities, with mentors, with safety nets. Wealth had given him freedom, confidence, and influence. He rarely faced the kind of fear Lily displayed that morning. Yet here she was, young and small, yet moving with a dignity and determination that far exceeded anything he had seen in some of the most powerful people he knew. It made him question the way he had viewed success, strength, and power all these years. Perhaps the strongest moments in life were not measured in deals or dollars, but in how someone carried themselves in the face of hardship. For the next few days, Alexander couldn't get Lily out of his mind. He found himself replaying every detail, the way her hands shook slightly as she picked up the glasses, focus in her eyes, the way she ignored the whispers and stares of the other patrons. He imagined her life beyond that cafe, trying to guess what challenges she had faced to get. To that point, was she supporting a family? Was she struggling with school or bills or illness? He didn't know yet, but he felt a pull, an instinct that he needed to understand more about her life. Meanwhile, Lily returned to her routine at the cafe, unaware that she had caught the attention of one of the wealthiest men in the city. Days were filled with endless work, serving tables, cleaning spills, taking orders, and offering polite smiles to customers who often didn't even notice her. But her mind was never truly at rest. She carried anxiety with her, always thinking about money, about her mother's health, about how she could make ends meet. The spill that day had been a small disaster in her world, yet a rare display of her persistence and determination. She didn't realize that the act that had embarrassed her so much had also revealed a side of her that others, even Alexander, could see and admire. Alexander, however, was not content to simply observe from afar. He began to pay more attention. To the cafe during his visits, he noticed small details he had never considered before. How the staff coordinated silently, how some employees were clearly overworked, and how a few patrons treated servers with impatience or disrespect. But Lily stood out to him above all. It wasn't just her efficiency, it was her spirit. Even when she stumbled or faced challenges, she continued unbroken. There was a spark in her, a fire that refused to be snuffed out. He also observed how Ethan responded to people like Lily. The boy's innocence made him notice things adults often overlooked. He reached out with curiosity and empathy, always asking questions, always trying to help.
Ow.
Alexander realized that these simple interactions were teaching Ethan about life, about kindness, and about seeing beyond wealth and status. Perhaps, Alexander thought, this small incident in the cafe could become a lesson, not just for Lily, but for his son, about human resilience and compassion. One day, Alexander decided to linger a little longer in the cafe, sitting quietly at his usual table, observing Lily without drawing attention. She moved gracefully between tables, her posture upright despite exhaustion. A customer accidentally knocked a plate to the floor, and she calmly picked it up, murmuring apologies. Alexander noticed the care she took, not just in cleaning, but in ensuring the customer felt respected, even if the moment had been inconvenient. There was artistry in her movement, a rhythm that came from experience and necessity. And Alexander was captivated. He began to imagine conversations with her. He thought about asking her about her life, her dreams, the obstacles she had faced. He wondered if she would see him as just another wealthy man, or if she would recognize that his interest was genuine. Alexander knew that in his world, gestures of kindness were often viewed with suspicion. People assumed motives, alliances, and agendas. But he wasn't looking to impress anyone or manipulate a situation. He wanted to understand her, to see the world through her eyes for a moment, and perhaps to act in a way that could genuinely make a difference. Alexander also reflected on his own privilege and isolation. He had employees, assistants, and managers who took care of everything. He rarely faced moments that challenged his humility or required him to rely on resilience in the same way ordinary people did. Watching Lily, he realized how insulated his life had been. He had been so focused on success, money, and influence that he had rarely seen the courage it took simply to survive daily life. He felt a strange admiration mixed with a subtle guilt for not noticing such strength earlier. Ethan, naturally curious, continued to ask questions. "Daddy, why doesn't she just ask for help?" he asked one morning as they watched Lily serve coffee. Alexander smiled. "Some people are very proud, Ethan. They try to handle their problems themselves, even if it's hard. That's not wrong. It's just their way." Ethan nodded, though the concept was new to him. He watched Lily closely, trying to understand her determination, trying to imagine why someone would continue even when life seemed so hard. Over the next week, Alexander's visits to the cafe became more frequent. He didn't always sit at the same table. Sometimes he observed from a distance. Sometimes he lingered at the counter, buying a simple coffee or pastry. Every time he noticed the small details that most people ignored, how Lily remembered customers' names, how she smiled even when exhausted, and how she never lost her composure despite repeated challenges. These observations deepened his respect for her and also sparked a quiet desire to help in a meaningful way. He began thinking of ways he could approach her without overwhelming or intimidating her. He knew that sudden gestures from someone in his position could seem patronizing or threatening. Lily was already carrying enough burdens. She didn't need added pressure from wealth or influence. Alexander wanted to act subtly, with care, so that any help he offered would be empowering rather than diminishing. Meanwhile, Lily's world continued to revolve around survival. She juggled shifts, cared for her mother, and tried to maintain a sense of normalcy in a life that often felt anything but normal. She noticed the wealthy man who seemed to observe her, but she did not think much of it. People like him rarely noticed her existence beyond a glance. She assumed he was another stranger, someone passing through her life without consequence. Yet Alexander saw more than she could imagine. He saw resilience, courage, intelligence, and a spark of potential. One morning, as Lily wiped tables and served drinks, a customer rudely complained about a minor mistake. Lily apologized politely, calming the situation with patience and grace. Alexander, observing from his corner table, felt a deep respect. He realized that true strength wasn't about authority or control, it was about handling life's challenges with dignity. He thought about his son, hoping Ethan was learning this same lesson about courage and compassion. Alexander decided that he could no longer remain a silent observer. He wanted to connect, to understand, to find a way to make a difference without diminishing Lily's pride or independence. He knew that the next step was delicate. Any action had to be thoughtful, respectful, and empowering. But he also knew that if he waited too long, the opportunity might pass. This was a moment of choice, and he was ready to act. As he left the cafe that day, Alexander made a decision. He would approach Lily not as a billionaire, not as a man of power, but as someone who had noticed her strength, admired her resilience, and wanted to offer an opportunity that could genuinely change her life. It would be subtle, careful, and meaningful. He wanted her to feel empowered, not obligated. He wanted to recognize her courage, not pity her struggle. And he knew that whatever happened next, this encounter would ripple far beyond the walls of the cafe, affecting not just Lily, but also Ethan, and perhaps even the way he viewed the world. And so, Alexander Hayes, billionaire, observer of life, and father, prepared himself for a new kind of challenge, not one of business or money, but of empathy, understanding, and the power of human connection. He knew that the next step, the next conversation, could change everything. Alexander Hayes had been observing Lily for days, and the more he watched, the more he became convinced that he needed to act. It wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was about something deeper, something instinctive that told him her life, her struggles, and her courage deserved recognition and support. But approaching her wasn't simple. He knew the vast gap between his world and hers could create suspicion or fear. A billionaire showing interest in a struggling waitress could easily be misunderstood. He had to be careful, subtle, and genuine. One morning, Alexander arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm glow over the empty streets and reflecting softly through the cafe windows. Lily was already there, arranging the chairs and preparing for the morning rush. Her movements were precise and practiced. But there was a visible wariness in her eyes, a quiet burden that she carried every day without complaint. Alexander felt a pang of empathy. How many mornings had she faced like this, exhausted yet determined, unseen yet vital? He decided to start with something small, a gesture that wouldn't alarm her but would open a door. He approached the counter, smiling gently. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm but casual. Lily looked up, startled for a moment, then returned the greeting politely. She didn't know him, had never spoken to him before. But something in his demeanor didn't feel like the usual wealthy customer who ignored the staff. There was respect in his eyes, not judgment. "I'd like a coffee," Alexander said, simple and unassuming. Lily nodded, preparing it quickly while glancing at him occasionally. He noticed the way she moved with efficiency, balancing multiple tasks without a single misstep. But he also noticed her subtle exhaustion, the faint dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly when pouring the coffee. It was a glimpse into the reality of her life, and Alexander's admiration deepened. When he received his coffee, Alexander lingered. "Can I sit here for a moment?" he asked. Lily hesitated but nodded. She returned to her duties, but her curiosity was piqued. There was something unusual about this man. He didn't seem like the other customers who'd barely noticed her existence. He observed quietly, not with judgment, but with a kind of genuine interest that made her uncomfortable in a good way. Like someone was seeing her for the first time. Alexander chose his words carefully. I hope this isn't strange. He began softly. I've been coming here for a while, and I've noticed something. It's remarkable about the way you handle things here. Lily paused, a hint of surprise crossing her face. Me? She asked cautiously. Alexander nodded. Yes, you. I see the way you carry yourself. It's the way you face challenges without giving up. It's rare, and it's impressive. Lily blinked, unsure how to respond. Compliments were not common. In her life, especially ones that seemed sincere rather than patronizing. Thank you, she said softly, her voice betraying a mix of shyness and skepticism. Alexander smiled. I don't say that lightly. I see courage in your actions. The courage to keep going, even when things get difficult. Not everyone notices, but I do. Her cheeks flushed slightly. She had spent so much of her life feeling invisible, struggling to survive, that this attention felt both strange and comforting. Alexander shook his head gently. You don't need to say anything. I just wanted you to know that someone sees your effort, your resilience, and your heart. That matters. For the first time, Lily felt a shift inside herself. She realized that her struggles, the long hours, the exhaustion, the embarrassment she had endured, were not invisible. Someone had noticed, genuinely and without judgment. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten validation, not for what she could do for someone else, but for who she was. Alexander continued carefully, sensing that she might pull back if he overstepped. I'd like to understand more about your world, he said softly. If you're comfortable, I'd like to hear your story, not just the work you do here, but your life, your dreams, your challenges. Lily looked at him, her heart racing. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Wealthy people rarely asked about her life. They barely noticed her existence. Yet here was someone who seemed genuinely curious, someone who wanted to understand. Without judgment, over the next hour, Alexander and Lily talked quietly in a corner of the cafe. She shared small pieces of her life, careful not to reveal too much, but gradually opening up as she sensed his sincerity. She spoke about her mother, who had been ill for some time, and the medical bills that consumed most of her wages. She talked about the late-night shifts, the exhaustion, the frustration of feeling trapped in a cycle she couldn't break. She admitted her fears and doubts, the ones she had never shared with anyone. Alexander listened without interruption. Absorbing every detail, he asked questions gently, not out of curiosity alone, but out of a desire to understand. He wanted to see her world as she saw it, to comprehend the burdens she carried and the strength it took to bear them. He learned about her dreams, small dreams, yet profound. She wanted stability, education, and a chance to create a better life for herself and her mother. She wanted recognition, not for fame or wealth, but for her effort and resilience. As Lily spoke, Alexander realized that her story was more than just about hardship. It was a testament to human strength, the power of determination, and the dignity of someone refusing to give up despite overwhelming obstacles. Her struggles were not dramatic in the way movies portray tragedy. They were quiet, persistent, and relentless. And yet they were also filled with courage, resourcefulness, and a deep sense of responsibility. Ethan, who had accompanied Alexander that morning, observed quietly from a nearby table. He watched Lily with fascination, noticing her strength and patience. He occasionally asked questions, and Alexander guided him gently, helping Ethan understand the importance of empathy and respect. It was a small lesson for the boy, one that would shape his understanding of life and human dignity. By the end of the conversation, Alexander felt a profound respect for Lily. He realized that this meeting had changed something inside him as well. He had spent years measuring success by money, power, and influence. But here was a young woman whose courage and resilience far surpassed anything he had encountered in the business world. Her strength was unrefined yet pure, forged in the fires of daily struggle. And it commanded admiration in a way that boardroom victories never could. Alexander knew he couldn't offer her pity or charity, that would diminish her dignity. He wanted to empower her, to provide opportunities that respected her independence and resilience. He thought carefully about how he could do this, and decided that the first step was to provide her with resources and mentorship, quietly and respectfully, without overwhelming her. He wanted her to see possibilities she hadn't considered. Without feeling indebted or humiliated, he began by helping her with small, tangible things. He discreetly paid off some of her immediate bills, ensuring that she wouldn't feel embarrassed or beholden. He provided guidance on financial planning, education options, and career development, all in a way that emphasized empowerment rather than dependency. He wanted her to feel capable, not rescued. Over the following weeks, Alexander and Lily's connection deepened. They met outside the cafe, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for quiet conversations in public spaces. He introduced her to mentors, educators, and resources that could help her achieve her goals. He listened as she explored options for her future, offering advice but never imposing his will. He encouraged her to dream bigger than she had dared before. Helping her recognize her own potential, Lily, in turn, began to trust him. She realized that his interest in her life was sincere, not a game or a publicity stunt. She began to imagine a future beyond the cafe, a future where she could support her mother without constant fear, pursue education, and perhaps even start a career that fulfilled her passions. The spark that Alexander had noticed during that first encounter was now being nurtured, and Lily felt a renewed sense of hope and possibility. Alexander also saw changes in Ethan. The boy had learned valuable lessons about empathy, courage, and human dignity. He observed Lily's strength and resilience and began to understand that real success was not measured by wealth or status alone, but by the ability to face life's challenges with courage and compassion. Ethan asked questions, offered small gestures of kindness, and began to internalize the lessons his father was quietly teaching through action. Through these interactions, Alexander realized that the impact of their connection went beyond Lily's life. It was a reminder to him and to Ethan that true influence comes from recognizing and nurturing human potential. Wealth and power were tools, but empathy, respect, and understanding were what truly changed lives. And in Lily's case, her courage and resilience became the catalyst for transformation, not only for herself, but for the people who had the privilege to witness and support her journey. By the end of Part 3, Alexander had successfully built trust with Lily, bridging the gap between their worlds. He had recognized her strength, supported her with dignity, and begun to create opportunities for her to achieve her dreams. And while the journey was just beginning, foundation had been laid, a connection based on respect, empathy, and genuine recognition of human resilience. One that would ultimately change everything for Lily, for Alexander, and for Ethan. Lily's life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The small gestures Alexander had started with the discreet help with bills, guidance on education and career choices, and the quiet encouragement gradually opened doors that had seemed impossible before. Yet despite these new opportunities, she struggled with fear, uncertainty, and the lingering sense of inadequacy that had followed her all her life. Change, she realized, was not simple, even when it was positive at first. Lily focused on the practical support Alexander had provided. The medical bills for her mother had been cleared, relieving her of a constant, gnawing worry that had shadowed every decision she made. For the first time in years, she slept through the night without imagining worst-case scenarios. Her body and mind, long strained by stress, began to feel lighter. But alongside this relief came something more challenging: hope. Hope was unfamiliar territory, and it frightened her almost as much as hardship had. She had learned to survive, to expect disappointment, to settle for what was immediately possible. Dreaming beyond survival felt risky, almost dangerous. Alexander understood this fear better than Lily realized. He didn't push her. He allowed her to navigate her emotions and fears at her own pace. Instead, he focused on giving her the tools she needed to build confidence. He encouraged her to consider education options she had dismissed as unreachable. He connected her with tutors and mentors who could help her explore new skills and career paths. Each suggestion was framed not as charity, but as a way for her to recognize her own potential. Lily began to see the possibilities slowly. She enrolled in a night class at a local college studying business management. The first few weeks were intimidating. She often arrived early, worried that her lack of formal education would make her stand out as inadequate. But every time she struggled, Alexander reminded her that resilience mattered more than background. "You've already faced more challenges than most people will ever know," he said one evening. "You can handle this, and more. Trust yourself." His words, simple but sincere, became a mantra she repeated whenever doubt crept in. Ethan, too, played a surprising role in Lily's transformation. He began visiting the cafe more often, helping her with small tasks, learning to treat people with kindness and respect. At first, Lily felt awkward about his presence. She wasn't accustomed to a child from such a wealthy background taking interest in her life, yet over time, she grew to appreciate his curiosity, his thoughtful questions, and the quiet way he tried to understand her world. He asked about her classes, her mother, and her dreams. He didn't judge or pity her. Listened. As the weeks passed, Lily's confidence grew. She began to take on responsibilities at the cafe with renewed energy, but also started thinking about the future in a way she hadn't before. She dreamed of running her own business someday, a small cafe of her own, where employees would be treated with respect, where the pressure of survival wouldn't overshadow the joy of work. Alexander encouraged these ideas, helping her explore business planning, management, and networking opportunities. He never imposed his wealth or influence, but guided her to see that her dreams could be real if she pursued them with determination. However, the journey was not without challenges. Some days, the weight of her responsibilities and self-doubt threatened to overwhelm her. Late nights studying for classes, managing her mother's needs, and working long shifts left her exhausted. She sometimes questioned whether she was capable of balancing everything. On those days, Alexander and Ethan became her quiet support system. Alexander would check in with gentle advice, reminding her to pace herself, to ask for help when necessary. Ethan often offered encouragement with childlike sincerity, sharing small notes or drawings that lifted her spirits. Despite the growing trust between them, Lily remained cautious. She was aware of the vast gap between her world and Alexander's, a gap that could make her vulnerable to misunderstanding, gossip, or even exploitation. She guarded her heart carefully, accepting help without losing her sense of independence. This balance was delicate. She didn't want to feel like she was being rescued or like her success depended entirely on Alexander. She wanted to achieve things on her own, and he respected that. Alexander, in turn, was learning lessons of his own. His interactions with Lily challenged him to reflect on the nature of wealth, privilege, and power. He realized that real influence was not about control or recognition, but about empowerment. The impact of his support would be measured not by how much money he spent or how visible his actions were, but by the opportunities and confidence Lily could cultivate for herself. He also saw the ripple effect on Ethan, whose understanding of compassion and empathy deepened as he observed and participated in their interactions. As Lily progressed, subtle but meaningful changes began to show in her demeanor. Her posture became more confident, her voice steadier, her decisions more deliberate. People at the cafe noticed a new aura about her, an unspoken strength. Customers began to respond to her warmth and efficiency, unaware of the battles she had fought to arrive at this point. Even colleagues began to respect her differently, sensing her quiet determination. Lily realized that change, once internalized, could ripple outward, influencing not just her life but the lives of those around her. Then came a moment that tested her newfound confidence. A local business competition offered a prize to aspiring entrepreneurs with innovative ideas. Lily considered entering, but doubt immediately arose. Who am I to compete with people who have education, experience, and resources I don't? She thought. The idea of presenting herself in front of judges, many of whom came from privileged backgrounds, filled her with anxiety. She felt the familiar sting of inadequacy that had haunted her for years. Alexander noticed her hesitation and encouraged her gently. "You already have something they don't," he said. "Resilience. Real-world experience. A courage to keep going despite challenges. That's invaluable. Out! Don't let fear stop you from showing what you're capable of." He didn't promise her victory, only the belief that she deserved a chance to try. Ethan added his own small encouragement. "You can do it. You're amazing, and I know it." Lily smiled at the boy, grateful for the innocent faith he had in her. With their support, Lily decided to enter the competition. She poured herself into the preparation, developing a detailed business plan for her own cafe, emphasizing a vision where employees were valued and customers felt like family. She presented her ideas with a mixture of nervousness and determination, surprising herself with how naturally the words flowed once she started speaking. For the first time, she realized that her voice mattered, that her perspective had value. The competition day arrived, and the judges were impressed by her presentation. They noted her creativity, practical knowledge, and the authenticity that shone through her words. She didn't win first place, but she received a special recognition award for innovation and community focus. More importantly, she gained validation proof that she could stand on her own, that her ideas and efforts were worthy of recognition. Alexander and Ethan were both there, cheering silently and proudly, witnessing a moment of transformation that symbolized months of hard work and perseverance. Following the competition, opportunities began to multiply. Lily was approached by a local mentor who offered guidance on starting her cafe. She received invitations to workshops and networking events. Slowly, her world expanded beyond the cafe where she had worked for years. The once impossible dream of independence and financial stability now seemed tangible. Yet she remained grounded, aware of the effort required to sustain this progress. She didn't allow success to cloud her humility. Instead, she used it as motivation to continue learning, growing, and helping her mother. Throughout this period, her relationship with Alexander and Ethan deepened. It evolved from support and mentorship into a genuine bond of trust and friendship. Alexander continued to provide guidance without imposing control. Ethan, who had started as an observer, became a friend who celebrated small victories with Lily, making her feel seen and valued in ways she had never experienced before. Their interactions were not about charity, but about human connection, understanding, and mutual respect. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Lily faced skepticism from people who doubted her abilities due to her background. She encountered bureaucratic obstacles, financial setbacks, and moments of self-doubt. Yet each obstacle became an opportunity to demonstrate resilience and resourcefulness. She learned to navigate difficulties with patience, strategy, and determination, drawing strength from the foundation she had built with Alexander's guidance and Ethan's encouragement. By the end of Part 4, Lily had transformed significantly. She was no longer just a waitress carrying burdens quietly. She had become a young woman with direction, confidence, and tangible opportunities to create the life she had once only dreamed of. Alexander and Ethan's presence had been catalysts, but the true force of change came from Lily herself. Her courage, perseverance, and willingness to embrace possibility. The stage was now set for the final part of her journey, where her hard work, resilience, and the bonds she had formed would culminate in a turning point that could truly change everything. Lily's life had changed dramatically since that fateful day when Alexander first stepped into the cafe with Ethan. What had started as simple acts of kindness and discreet guidance had grown into a full journey of transformation. By now, she had established a foundation for her future, foundation built not on luck, but on determination, courage, and the support of people who genuinely believed in her potential. Part 5 of her story would reveal the culmination of all: her struggles, growth, and the bonds she had forged, showing how her resilience could transform not only her life, but also the lives of those around her. The morning air felt different that day. Lily woke up with a strange combination of excitement and anxiety, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Her dream of owning her own cafe was closer than ever, and yet, with the final steps looming ahead, fear of failure crept in. Glanced at her mother sleeping peacefully, and for a moment she allowed herself to be reminded of why she had fought so hard. Every late night, every challenge, every small victory had led to this moment, a chance to turn her vision into reality. Alexander had arranged a meeting with potential investors who could help Lily secure funding for her cafe. She had spent weeks preparing her presentation, refining her business plan, practicing how to communicate her ideas clearly. Yet standing in the sleek office with polished floors and modern decor, she felt a wave of insecurity. She noticed the investors in their tailored suits, confident and poised, and wondered if she truly belonged there. But then she remembered Alexander's words. "You've faced more challenges than they ever will. Trust yourself." With a deep breath, she reminded herself that her experiences, her struggles, her determination, her authenticity were her strength, not her weakness. When it was her turn to present, Lily stepped forward with a mix of nerves and determination. She spoke from the heart, sharing her vision of a cafe that would not only provide excellent service and food, but also create an environment where employees felt valued and supported. She described her personal journey, the challenges she had overcome, and the lessons she had learned along the way. Her words carried a sincerity that no polished speech could replicate, and the investors were visibly moved by her passion and authenticity. One of the investors leaned forward and asked a question about profit margins, and Lily responded with clarity and confidence, showing that she had not only dreamed, but had also planned practically. Another investor asked how she would manage staffing and customer service. She explained her philosophy of respect, training, and empowerment. Each answer reinforced her credibility, demonstrating that she was not just a dreamer, but a capable entrepreneur ready to take on the responsibilities of running a business. By the end of the meeting, investors were impressed. They not only offered funding, but also mentorship, promising to guide her through the complexities of starting and managing her own cafe. Lily left the office with a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She had faced her fears, presented her ideas, and been recognized for her potential. It was a pivotal moment, a confirmation that her efforts and perseverance had been worth it. As Lily prepared to open her cafe, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the difficult days when survival had felt impossible, when fear and doubt had threatened to overwhelm her. She remembered crawling along the floor, serving tables with humiliation and exhaustion, feeling trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape. Those memories, painful as they were, now felt like stepping stones. They had taught her resilience, empathy, and the importance of using her experiences to lift herself and others. The day of the cafe's opening was a mixture of celebration and nerves. Lily's mother, friends, and a few loyal customers from the old cafe attended. Alongside Alexander and Ethan, the space was beautiful, cozy, and welcoming, reflecting Lily's vision of warmth, respect, and community. She had put her heart into every detail, from the layout of the tables to the quality of the ingredients. The atmosphere exuded care and thoughtfulness. As the first customers arrived, Lily felt a sense of pride she had never experienced before. She moved through the cafe with confidence, greeting patrons, coordinating staff, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. She saw the smiles on their faces, the satisfaction in their expressions, and realized that her efforts were making a tangible difference. This was not just about financial success. It was about creating a space where people felt valued and cared for. Just as she had always longed to feel in her own life, Ethan stayed by her side throughout the day, helping with small tasks and learning the practicalities of running a business. His admiration for Lily was evident, and his presence reminded her of how far she had come, not just for herself but for the young boy who had observed her journey and learned important lessons about empathy, humility, and perseverance. Alexander, quietly watching from a corner, allowed Lily to shine, understanding that her independence and success were the real rewards of his guidance. The cafe's opening day was more than a business milestone. It was a celebration of transformation, It symbolized the culmination of years of struggle, growth, and resilience. Lily's mother, who had once worried about the basic necessities of life, now watched her daughter thrive, proud of her strength and determination. The loyal customers who had supported her throughout her journey felt the continuity of care and attention that Lily had always embodied. And for Alexander and Ethan, it was a moment of fulfillment, witnessing the tangible results of their quiet support and mentorship. As the weeks passed, the cafe flourished. Lily's dedication, attention to detail, and philosophy of respect and empowerment created a loyal customer base and a motivated, happy staff. Implemented programs for employee growth, training, and recognition, ensuring that the work environment reflected the values she held dear. Her story began to inspire others in her community, showing that determination, integrity, and compassion could create opportunities and transform lives. Yet, even with her success, Lily remained humble. She remembered the days of struggle, the people who had doubted her, and the moments when she had felt like giving up. These memories kept her grounded, reminding her that success was not just about personal gain, but about making a positive impact on others. She used her platform to mentor young people, offering guidance and encouragement to those facing challenges similar to the ones she had overcome. One evening, as the cafe quieted and the last customers left, Lily sat down with Alexander and Ethan. They discussed future plans, possibilities for expansion, and ways to give back to the community. Ethan shared ideas with enthusiasm, demonstrating a growing understanding of leadership and compassion. Alexander listened, offering advice, only when asked, proud of the independence and confidence Lily had cultivated. In that quiet moment, the bond between them felt complete, a connection built not on wealth or hierarchy, but on mutual respect, trust, and shared growth. Lily's journey had not been easy. It had required courage to face humiliation, perseverance, to endure challenges, and resilience to overcome doubt. But through it all, she had discovered her strength, her voice, and her potential. The person who had once crawled along the floor, serving tables in desperation, had become a confident entrepreneur, a role model, a symbol of hope for others. The final piece of her transformation came when she reflected on her own story and realized its broader significance. She had been given opportunities, yes, but it was her determination and character that had turned those opportunities into lasting change. She understood that wealth and privilege could open doors, but they could not replace the courage, hard work, and integrity required to walk through them. She had learned that true success was measured not only by personal achievement, but by the ability to empower and uplift others along the way. As the sun set on the bustling cafe, Lily looked around at the space she had created, the people she had empowered, and the life she had built. The journey that had begun with fear, humiliation, uncertainty, had culminated in a life full of hope, purpose, and fulfillment. Alexander and Ethan's quiet influence had been the catalyst, but it was Lily's own resilience, intelligence, and compassion that had transformed her world. She smiled, thinking about the future. There were more challenges ahead, more lessons to learn, and more opportunities to grow. But she now faced them with confidence, courage, and a heart full of hope. Her story was no longer just about survival. It was about thriving, inspiring, and creating a lasting impact. In that moment, Lily knew that everything had truly changed, not because of wealth, luck, or circumstance, but because she had embraced her potential and refused to let fear define. Her journey had come full circle. From crawling on the floor in desperation to standing tall as a successful entrepreneur, mentor, and role model, Lily had rewritten her life story. And as she looked toward the future, she understood that the possibilities were endless, limited only by the courage to dream, the determination to act, and the resilience to persevere.